we'll talk about a very important issue, which is philosophy in manual, and that manual was produced by UNESCO. UNESCO, as you know, is the United Nations organization that works on education, scientific, and culture in general. So this manual was, printed by and supported by King Abdullah bin Abdulaziz International Program for Culture on Peace, of Peace and Dialogue. Now, when we say dialogue, your mind should go directly to the word peace, because whenever you have dialogue, you don't have wars. You always have problem solving, and you think about how you can handle the problems through management of thinking and dialectic, as we mentioned in Sartre right now. Now, this is, as you can see, the picture here gives you an idea that it goes back to a way to introduce all cultures together and to make a kind of dialogue between them, so as to listen the problems that they may face nowadays. Because if you accept dialogue, so you are away from war. So here, the program that UNESCO tried to introduce in this manual of philosophy is mainly based on the culture of peace. It was the one I'm introducing to you here. It was introduced in 2014, and it talks about the publication of the legal status of the countries and how they should work on peace. Now, that was the acknowledgement of the United Nations or UNESCO from the Secretariat of UNESCO. Now, of course, you have a forward from the delegation who worked on it. Okay, I'm just trying to tell you what is it about, and you have the preface that gives you the UNESCO principal mission, which is constructing the defense of peace. So it works on peace in mind. This is very important. So because they think that war is introduced through the mind. If your mind is if you think by your mind or using your mind peacefully, that will not end into war. So they think, since by our minds if we use it negatively, we end into crime of war. So through the same instrument, which is mind, we should begin with peace. So this is the idea of UNESCO. So peace in the minds of men and women is an infinite one, and it is constantly renewed as a need for change over time. Okay, this is the idea. So they try to share the knowledge here of different methods and how to deal with philosophy, as you can see here, philosophical thought of human mind. Okay, so as to construct what enforces freedom and liberty, away from all forms of absolutism. Absolutism is a word that is connected also with what is called totalitarian. If you heard this word, totalitarian, when you think anything that belongs to totalitarian is usually equalizes what is called anti-democracy, because you have the dictatorship way of thinking and power. So the philosophy is not a solitary task. It represents dialogue, as you can see, with other cultures. This is very important. And here, this manual, think of what should be as a global world, okay, a globalized world. because we are all referring to this world as global citizenship, as global citizens, sorry. And if you believe in global citizenship, so you should also work on dialogue from to embrace, you know, what is called the diversity of thinking. So we have different ways of thinking, and we have to adjust to each other. We have to accept each other, and that is what is called intellectual diversity. And they think, UNESCO thinks that intellectual diversity is what enriches our world. Okay, so they formed what is called the International UNESCO Constitution. You know, Dastur, as if you have as if it is a constitution for, you know, any country, that states, this is their main item: ignorance of each other's ways and lives has been a common cause throughout the history of mankind of that suspicion and mistrust between peoples of the world, through which the differences have all too often broken into war. This is very important quotation. Okay, can you see it? This is very important quotation that reflects the idea or the constitution of UNESCO, that talks about how the method of what is called dialogue. See, dialogus means in Greek through speeches, okay, or through speech. Logos is the word, or it is a speech in Greek, and dia means through. So through speech we can solve our problems. This is it, okay? And they thought, or they think, who believe in UNESCO constitution, that if you know about differences, if you know about the differences in human and mankind and in history, throughout history, you can solve your problems in an adequate way without breaking into wars. This is the main idea. So in 21st century, the statement is more relevant to what is called later on as the international decade of what is called rapprochement of cultures. This is the French word that is borrowed into English language, rapprochement of cultures, which is in Arabic تقارب الحضارات. So it's quite the opposite of clash of cultures or clash of civilization. So تقارب الحضارات في مقابل صراع الحضارات. Okay, so we have rapprochement of rapprochement. It's a French word. Rapprochement of cultures or culture. It's the opposite of clash of civilizations. So that was the idea. And you know, all people working in philosophy, they have their projects and dialogues and that, and they produced this manual, and they thought that this manual should be taught to teachers first, so that they can, as I'm doing now, they can reflect on and transfer it to their students and to researchers like you, so that they can have what is called intercultural dialogue. This is very important. So they spread that within this, as you can see, dialogue and the promising project. And the general introduction of it was, today we are offering this book as known as the modest title, Philosophical Manual. See, and here they are giving a different perspective of it, of course. I don't want to waste your time here. I will leave it to you to read the beginning, the introduction of it, until we reach the table of contents. The table of contents gives you an idea how it is divided. After the general introduction, you have what is called here the cosmology and the human person. So they are talking in brief about the intellectual self-engendering cosmic principle. So cosmology is the, in brief, if you want to search for cosmology, again, it's a word that goes to originally to Greek and Latin. You can search for it. I want you to search for that. Cosmology. Anything ending with logy is the study of. Okay, so it talks about, it's from Greek, cosmos, which is the world. Okay, and it's a branch of astronomy here, concerned with the studies of the origin of evolution of the universe. And they talked about different things, still theories that we are having or facing nowadays. It talks about the Big Bang theory and the future of the universe, and how the scientists studied the origin of evolution, and how that affected material life or existence, and eventually fate and the universe. Okay, so certain, let's say, scientific questions raised here, and that concentrates on the human person. I know that we don't have enough time. No, I still have time, so I can continue. Sorry, I thought it's about to end. So they talked about the intellectual self-engendering. They talked about the creation of the world. So because philosophers have, or any person working on dialogue, they have to know the origin, what happened, and why we are having clashes nowadays, and that they have to go back to theologies. Theologists are, theology. It's the study of, and again, you have logy is the study, but theo in Greek also means the study that concentrates on the system of nature, of divinity or divine. So it's, let's say, broadly religious, and it talks about beliefs in religion. And you, by this, when you study theology, so you are taking the religious form. So you are considering certain religions here and how they do think about the creation of the world. So it's before scientists discovered it. Now, the book of knowing the creations of, all things that were that were mentioned in our books, our religious books, the birth of the world and the mechanics. Okay. Also, that part. So the first part is like the creation of the world. Okay, and how human person was thinking about it. The second part talks about epistemology, and epistemology is that part that is concentrated, the study of knowledge, let's say. So as I told you, this is part of philosophy, a branch of philosophy that talks about the study of knowledge. And as you can see here, the model of knowledge. And here you can see, for example, the Egyptian mathematics and philosophy and how they learned it. Mathematics, the pharaohs, الفراعنة, and modern theory of science. Also, of course, here you have the writer. Everyone is discussed through an article introduced by a certain writer. Also, they talked about the logical structure and linguistic structure, and this is very important to you, students, since you are in the English department. I think this part, number 2, is very important for you, not only because of that we need it for this session in our Western thought and philosophy in our semester here, but because I think you need it in your specification and study. So the text here is by Kane, and it's called The Linguistic and Mathematical Structure of Oral Enumeration Utterances. So how, it's about a philosophy of language in a way, okay? And the rational relationship to the world, our rational relationship, how we do think about nature rationally, which is by reason, okay? Then we have the political form of living together. So first we introduced it according to cosmology, and then according to epistemology. So these are branches of philosophy. And then the political philosophy that I gave you in a lecture before. So they go here to the political forms of living together and how the government and the public space are governed and formed. And they talk about it from also according to the different views of life and and the rights in this world, and the charters that led to what is called the Declaration of Human Rights, and that was declared in the Revolution, the French Revolution. And then you have the communal life and the exercise of thought, how they thought about life. Um, and of course, that was an essay on the problem with philosophy in different. Now, forget about. I don't want to restrict it to Africa or certain countries or regions. You can take this manual and work on it or understand it to be part of the universe or the world in the way they used to think. And then another very important issue that was tackled in this manual is the gender equality. Gender equality, it talks about femaleness and human identity, and how can the gender issue be used to correct the philosophical tradition, that if we think of things from a point of view or from what is called gender lens, okay, يعني من منظور جندري, which is talking about feminism. So the way you think about tradition is may differ. So they took the tradition concerning human nature and try to understand that from gender lens. Okay. Also, they talked about here, for example, the matronymics of the status of woman, the idea of freedom, the humanity, and so on. Also, another issue that is very well discussed by UN organizations in general is environment. Now, how the person or people or man is related to not only to others, related to nature, related to the environment. So they talk about the environment and the relation with religion and freedom and humanism. Also, the idea of environment, what is called environmental ethics, الأخلاق البيئية in Arabic, الأخلاق البيئية. So how man should accept or should work with nature to preserve it, not to consume it. Okay. And the nature of aesthetics. Aesthetics is another field of philosophy that I told you before. It talks about whatever is known as the form of modern art or arts in general, and what is beautiful and what is not. And this is the discussion. Okay, so they discussed lovers of plants, for example, lovers of or not only plants, animals, and so on. So they talk about the nature of life and social life, how it affects nature in different ways. So, and then they discussed arts and creation. Once again, they go back to relate art with creation and their representation, and how freedom is clear, is introduced here. Also, they try to, in a way, to discuss the idea of what is called negritude. Negritude is, in a way, introduced to discuss the quality of being not accepting any way of representation from their point of view. They try to accept others and be more humanistic, let's say. So that question was introduced there. And the art of national feeling, the art of the authors, artistic authors, and so on. Till they went to the Arab region, and of course every part of it is given is taken from different dimensions according to different countries. Okay, the cosmology, human person, epistemology, as you can see, they talked about the treatise of the soul and the first philosophy and what is called as Averroes or semantics, which is you know Averroes is Ibn Rushd. Okay, Averroes is Ibn Rushd in Arabic. So they try to study cosmology tested by Averroes. كيف تناول ابن رشد علم الكون. Okay, using semantics, علم المعاني in Arabic. Okay, and the decisive treatise of Averroes, and then epistemology, فلسفة المعرفة, and on first philosophy الكندي. I'm sure you heard this name, الكندي, who talked about الفلسفة and knowledge of self and knowledge of things, and that was also discussed with some a way of practical, self and knowledge and practical philosophy. And they try to discover the political forms of living together, civilization and history. And here we come to our main topic, civilization and history, and that was discussed by Ibn Khaldun. في مقدمة ابن خلدون. This is how here we are transliterating. Okay, this is a transliteration of the word المقدمة Ibn Khaldun, and the power of hybridization of cultures. Hybridization is the mixing and acceptance of different cultures. For example, how they merged into others. Indian, Persian, and till the Arab world. And we have the different mirrors of princes, the apprentice, and the fables. Ibn al-Muqaffa, okay, this is Ibn al-Muqaffa, how he introduced it, and the examples of fables into Ibn al-Muqaffa, the idea of, the methodologies that or myths that we took before from Greek and Latin and Persian and Roman. And then the man, dragon, snake, and different, stories by Ibn al-Muqaffa. Then they started laws and, different legislations and judges. Al-Farabi, one of the major introducers and philosophers in Islam. He was used as one of the main famous people known in that area and era. And the grammar of emancipation of plurality of languages, Islam as a foundation of political power. Then the same topics were discussed here: emancipation of women, gender equality. The name Tahtawi, he was known as the one of the famous people who worked on gender equality in Arab literature. And they also thought about environment and nature and the difference between local and global. Okay. Also, you can see here how they treated and thought of nature and environment. They tried to improve the way of thinking and the human reasoning in that, till they created arts and logic and aesthetics from that point of view. And you have here Al-Asfahani, the book of songs that is well known to introduce art and also that gives very images that reflect politics in a way. Also, we can see in the Asian and Pacific, you have the cosmology of a human person, the mysteries, we have the idea of being and non-being and nothingness and fullness. And again, this is a way of existentialism that we discussed now in Sartre, if you remember. Also, epistemology, the idea of trying to understand what is philosophizing about what is the philosophy of knowledge and teaching philosophy. How can we teach philosophy? And how can we construct or deconstruct the idea of desire in our arts? Also, political forms, different political forms, and living together was introduced by another idea, which is called individual ethics, al-akhlaq al-fardiyya, okay, as versus al-akhlaq al-jama'iyya or jam'iyya, group ethics or nation ethics, or you see. And that was the properties of and lightness of body and mind. Of course, different. We have, for example, Confucius, or a very famous philosopher, Confucius. This is it, okay, who talked about the relationship or the relation between person and family and the feeling of belongingness, and very, very refined belonging to one each other, and also how they felt about, or how they thought about governance, about humility and soft power, as against to hard power that would be that was what causes wars and problems that we may face in politics. Of course, they discussed also soul and self control, and what is called passive resistance in politics. Passive resistance, it's opposed to active. Active resistance is what causes a war, but passive resistance, according to Mahatma Gandhi, for example, leads to what is called passive resistance. It's against violence. Okay, so this is very important, raised by Gandhi, and many, gender equality perspectives were raised. For example, in Arabic, we have what we call Rumi love poems. Maybe if you talk with those who are specialized in Arabic language, he talked a lot about gender equality and intersubjectivity in his poems. And also the idea of discussing environment and nature from the point of view of altruism. Altruism is a very important issue that is discussed to treat the philosophy of thinking about nature, the relationship between nature and the environment, and considering environment rather than selfishness. Okay, so it's giving more to nature rather than to yourself. Okay, so that is in a way a mindful setting to the environmental crisis that we are even living nowadays, and to Mother Earth that we are facing nowadays. And this talks about the falling back in love with Mother Earth. This is what we need nowadays, even in the crisis of coronavirus. And that was discussed by one of the major philosophers here, Hannah. Now, the art of creation, the living of a human world, and the power of beauty, and so on, till we can see here now the Latin American Caribbean introduction of philosophy. Again, the same topics were handled in different philosophers, as you can see. So, but of course, each one is taking that from a different point of view, okay, according to their stories, to their myths or mythologies, according to their philosophers, for example. And they tackled the same ideas of consciousness and of political forms and living together and discourse, but according to their own stories and their own what is called chronicles. So they have different ways of thinking of what we call hermeneutic in Latin. It talks about the chronicle of governments, okay, good governments, and the way they they knew about Plato and all the founders of philosophy and culture and philosophy of thought before that you already took me with me before, till we have what is called the pedagogy of the oppressed, which is used or that was introduced by Paulo Ferrero, or Paulo Freire. Okay, he's one of those people who were talking about awareness and libertarian awareness, talking about the oppressed. Okay, and this is very important, that he handled the oppressed people, and he talked about them and discussed the problems that they are facing because of their oppression they are feeling, or they are suffering from. Now, the politics of life, the idea of feminism, environment, and so on. Okay? I want to end here just to give you the idea of the environment and art of creation, ethology, ecology of liberation, and so on. And you can see, I advise you to read parts of it. Of course, I'm sure you cannot take all of it. I advise you to read the part that talks about the European rather than the African, because that gives you a more rich uh, way of thinking. And I know it's very, very large, but just you can, skim it in a way, or scam it, to reach the major ideas. Here you can see the names of professors that worked on that and who helped in briefing this manual that is very important to those who are concerned with philosophy and the study of philosophy, as you can see. Okay, I will leave this with the commentaries with you so that you can later have an idea. This gives you a very brief idea, students, about how literature and how thinking developed through all over the world, with what is called a manual of philosophy. Okay, I'll stop recording now and listen to your questions.